A farmer wanted to determine the amount of water used every week during the drought. He measured the amount of water from a JoJo water tank used on the farm. He determined the volume of water in liters 2 weeks. After he started measuring, was volume is equal to negative 100 t squared plus 200 t plus 2400. So now how many weeks was the volume at maximum? We know at maximum, at max, our the volume, the V over the T should be equal to 0. So now this is 1.1. So now, our V prime will be equal to dV over dt, which is equals to. So now we'll do power down. Power down, it will be minus 200. Power up will be t 2 minus 1, plus 200, right, which is equals to 0. So now you will have minus 200t is equals to minus 200. And then we divide both sides by negative 200, then your t is equals to 1. So after 1 week, and then now 1.2, they're saying that after how many weeks will the tanks be empty? So at the tank will be empty when V is equals to 0. So you'll have got negative 100 t squared plus 200 t plus 2400 is equals to 0. So now you divide both sides by negative 100. You divide both sides by negative 100, right? You divide both sides by negative 100, then you will have t squared minus 2t, minus 24 is equals to 0. Okay, so now you factorize. The factors of 24 is here you've got t and t. Then the factors of 24, you've got 6 and 4. Okay, here it will be minus, and then here it will be plus. Then your t is equals to 6, or your t is equals to negative 4. Okay, so now the tank will be empty. After 6 weeks. After 6 weeks. So now let's do 1.3. Determine the rate at which the volume changes at t is equals to 3. The rate at which the volume, we take it from 1.1 there. Our V prime of t is equals to negative 200 t plus 200. Yeah. So now our t is equals to 3. At t is equals to 3. Our V prime of 3 will be equal to negative 200 of multiplied by 3 plus 200. Okay, which will be equal to negative 400. So now the volume will decrease because it's negative. The volume will decrease. The volume will decrease at, that's volume at 400 liters in a week. Yeah. So now we can do the other question. A particle moves along a straight line. The distance s in meters of particle from a fixed point on the line at time t seconds is given by this equation. So now calculate the particle's initial velocity. So the velocity, we know that from the distance, we know that the velocity is equals to distance, which is s, divided by time. So now here 2.1, you are given s of t, which is equals to 2t squared minus 18t plus 45. So now our rate will be s prime, the velocity s prime of t, which is equals to, power down, it will be 4t minus 18, right? And then we know that initially, the velocity will be equal to 0. So now our our time is equal to 0 initially. So now we've got our t is equal to 0 initially. So it will be s prime of 0, which is equal to 4 into 0 minus 18. Yeah, which is equals to negative 18. It will be negative 18 meter per second. Negative 18 meter per second. So now let's go to 2.2. Determine the rate at which the velocity of the particles is changing at t second. The rate, we do the same, we differentiate. So our s prime of t will be equal to, we differentiate this equation, so it will be 4 meter per second. You just differentiate here, power down. Then let's go to 2.3. that was 1 mark. Okay, so after how many seconds will the particle be closest to the fixed point? Okay, so we know that at the fixed point, our velocity will be equal to 0, right? Our v prime is equal to 0. So now, already we're given the v prime there. In other words, I wanted to say our s prime. So, you will just say our s of t is equals to 4t minus 18, which is equals to 0. Then I've got 4t is equals to 18, and then my t should be 4.5 seconds sec, because we're looking for how many seconds. We're looking for the second. Okay,